Hello, how are you? So I did a long run yesterday and afterwards I felt absolutely freezing cold, and it got me thinking, I am always freezing after I run. Might not be at the time, but sometimes half an hour, even up to 2 hours later, I'm shivering and I'm absolutely like a block of ice. So I wanted to explore this a little bit because I know this is something that a lot of runners do struggle with. Now, not everybody, some runners doesn't bother them at all, but I know for lots of us, feeling cold after you run is a really common problem, and it can be difficult to know how to avoid it. So I've got a few little tips to share with you about how to stop yourself getting cold after you run, but also just wanted to talk a bit about why it happens. Now, I've mentioned before this word homeostasis, and this is the body wanting to keep everything nicely in balance. And our body temperature is one of the things that it wants to keep stable around 37 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, everything in our body can function normally. The hypothalamus is the part of the brain that controls temperature regulation. And when our body temperature goes up too high, the hypothalamus triggers mechanisms that reduce the body temperature, and conversely, if our body temperature drops too low, then it triggers mechanisms to raise our body temperature. Now, when we're running, our body generates a lot of heat. We're using big muscles which are working repeatedly, and in the process of working, they generate a lot of heat. So our body needs to cool down. Now, that happens in two ways, which I'm sure you will be aware of. Firstly, through sweating. Our body produces sweat, it sits on the surface of our skin, and as it evaporates away, it takes heat with it. So that's one way. The second way is by vasodilatation. This means our blood vessels expanding and widening to increase the amount of blood flow at the surface of the skin. When the blood flows close to the surface of the skin, it can then lose heat more easily. So, that's why you get a bright red face when you run. It's the blood vessels opening up, diverting as much blood as possible to the surface of the skin so it can lose heat. And that way it can help to cool down your internal or your core temperature. So those are the two ways that our body cools itself down. Now, when you stop running, your body has obviously been generating all of this heat, but when you stop running, your body temperature starts to fall, and your body doesn't want this to happen. So it triggers its mechanisms to increase your body temperature. How does it do this? Firstly, it stops you sweating. I think we're all aware when we stop exercising and we stop our run, quite quickly afterwards, we stop sweating so much. Rather than vasodilatation, we get vasoconstriction, so the blood vessels narrow down again, so more of our blood is central, there's less flowing at the surface and there's less heat loss. Then it actually wants to generate heat, and because we've stopped using our muscles for running, it can actually use our muscles to shiver. That very quick, repeated movement of our muscles will generate heat. And I think we've all experienced that when we get really cold, that we start shivering. So that's one of the ways that it actually generates heat. So if we keep those things in mind, and then we have a little think about what we can do after we run, it all kind of makes sense, doesn't it? First of all, when you finish, it's a good idea not to stop too quickly. We want to help our body transition from running into resting. So it's very tempting after you've had a long run or a race and you're exhausted to just kind of conk out and lie down on the floor. But actually, if we can keep moving, if we can slow our running to maybe a slow jog, have a brisk walk, or even just keep moving around at the very least, then that will help our body transition from running into resting. Secondly, we want to get rid of that sweat. Now, if you have a towel in your kit bag, then you can use that to sort of dry yourself off. But really, I think one of the most important things is actually to get that wet kit off as soon as you can and replace it with completely new dry kit. Now, if you're a woman, then I really recommend trying to get your sports bra off as well. I don't know about you, but mine is always sodden and just needs to be peeled off after I've run. But actually, if you can get rid of that wet kit, then you'll really make a big difference in warming yourself up. So warm dry kit on as soon as you possibly can. Going along with that is actually seeing if you can get a shower. Now, obviously, if you're running from home and you return home, it's quite easy, hop in the shower. If you are away at a race or a run, there might be an option for you to have a shower. And if you are someone that really does struggle with the cold, then I do recommend that. It certainly makes a big difference to me. Obviously it washes away that layer of sweat that might still be sitting on your skin and losing heat, but it also helps to sort of warm you up much better than just changing your clothes, so hot water's good. The other thing is getting a hot drink or hot food, and hot food if you can, because that will kind of warm you from the inside out. Now I've started doing this actually because I do really struggle with this. So if I'm going away to a race or a run, then I'll actually pack a flask, one of those kind of thermos mugs, and shove that in my kit bag, so I know that I've got a hot drink to take once I really start to feel my body temperature kind of decreasing and start to feel those shivers coming on. So if you can do all of those things, it really will stop the shivers coming, and acting early and doing those things will hopefully prevent you from getting too cold. Now, I kind of am aware that a lot of people aren't necessarily going to identify with this because they just don't get it. They just pull on a jacket after they've finished or changed to put their race t-shirt on and they're absolutely fine. But you know, for some of us, it really is a problem. And I think we are all different, and there are different thermostats that we all have. Our body generates and loses different amounts of heat, so it is really just thinking about what is right for you. I know that after the Manchester Marathon, for example, I knew I was going to be waiting a while for my friend, and then I knew I was going to have a tram journey and then then a train journey home, followed by a car journey, and I knew I'd be absolutely freezing. So I did change my clothes, and I actually took ski gear. I had padded trousers, a down jacket, hat, scarf, gloves, and my thermos mug of tea, and it worked. It did the trick, and I avoided that really unpleasant feeling, cold, shivering. Getting somewhere warm if you can, you know, whether it's a hot car, whether it's inside in the village hall, whether it's back home, because that warm environment around you will really help to warm you up. And it's so tempting to just stand for ages chatting to your friends, isn't it? But if you can avoid that and get warm first, then you will be a much happier runner. So I hope that helps. If you like my tips, then just let me know, leave a little message in the comments, and I will be back soon with another running tip to help you run well.